Well, the president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, is in town today, and she comes at a time of a changing geopolitical landscape. Brazil has now overtaken the UK as the world's sixth largest economy, and along with the other BRICS countries, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has set in motion a movement of backing away from the dollar as the world currency, also making a lot of decisions independent of the West. Now, Rousseff is in many ways seen as the ambassador of BRICS. This is also the first day that directors of the World Bank begin meeting candidates to become the president of the World Bank. Now, typically, whoever is nominated by the U.S. is the one that's chosen, but things might be changing. There have been 11 World Bank's presidents so far, and they've all been Americans. But President Obama, of course, did nominate an American. He nominated Dartmouth College president Dr. Jim Yong Kim, who also co-founded a non-governmental organization that focuses on getting HIV and AIDS treatments to some of the world's poorest. Now, there's also Jose Antonio Ocampo, a professor at Columbia University, the former minister of finance in Colombia. The Dominican Republic formally nominated him for the World Bank position. And then there's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the finance minister for Nigeria. She was a managing director at the World Bank, and if chosen, she would be the World Bank's first female president. And I should mention, South Africa has already declared that it would be backing her. Now, I want to talk about all these items with Eva Gollinger, a lawyer and author with expertise on some of these matters. Hey there, Eva. The BRICS countries, they've said that they have wanted to speak with a unified voice and back one candidate for World Bank president. They haven't made that decision yet, but as I mentioned, South Africa already said it will back the candidate from Nigeria. What do you expect these other countries to do, and what message do you think they're hoping to send?
Well, certainly they're going to most likely back a candidate that's not the U.S. candidate. And in large part, that's to break away from what's been U.S. domination over the world economy, but also over the whole political environment. And we've seen this growing movement of what some call multipolarism around the world, and where there's no longer one country that's dominant, such as the United States, who's setting the agenda for everybody else, but rather countries are making decisions on a more respectful basis where there's consensus and where there's agreement amongst nations that everyone have some kind of participation and cooperation in what's going on. So I think that we'll certainly see a candidate nominated from what some would consider the southern nations, even though they're not all necessarily southern nations, but and the emerging economies and nations that are becoming more powerful around the world, and that the U.S. is going to have to really make a decision here, whether or not they want to become an equal player in world affairs, or do they want to maintain this sort of imperialist agenda and keep trying to impose their will against others.
Let's talk, Eva, about this current relationship between the U.S. and Brazil. A whole lot of people are wondering sort of about the lack of red carpet treatment here for President Rousseff. There was no state dinner, no big celebration. What do you think this is all about?
It could be a mix of factors. I mean, it could be a decision made on the side of Washington for some reason that they're not giving the same type of treatment to the Brazilian president. But I would actually have to say that part of it could be a request made on behalf of the Brazilian president. Dilma Rousseff is a very low-key, humble person who doesn't like any fanfare. And every place she's visited, she's always asked for just the really minimal treatment whatsoever, and no fancy dinners or hotels or big deals made out of her visit in that sense, but rather getting down to the dirty work of what needs to get done. At the same time, I mean, this is also, you have to remember, Dilma's visit to the United States comes after she's visited several other countries in Latin America, and some of those being adversaries of the United States, such as Venezuela, or at least political adversaries. And the United States was not on the top of her agenda. Whereas, on the other hand, Brazil was on the top of Obama's agenda, and he visited last year in March, in one of his first visits to Latin America. It was his first stop. So, I mean, there could be some stuff going on there in terms of getting back at retaliation against the Brazilian government because they haven't made the relationship with the United States a priority.
Certainly a lot of people are looking at that and saying, pointing out what you pointed out, which is that visit to Venezuela, pointing out the visit to Cuba. Also, kind of looking at what happened back in 2010, Brazil did join with Turkey to vote vote against sanctions for Iran at the UN. Certainly that was another thing that U.S. leaders weren't necessarily happy with. But there are other people, and let's talk about this really quick, Eva. I mean, in what ways has that relationship improved over the last few years?
The relationship with the United States?
Between the United States and Brazil.
Well, I mean, it's improved. It's always been a pretty good relationship. I think that even during the time of the previous president, Luis Lula Ignacio da Silva, it was a relationship that was very cordial, was still a strong relationship. But at the same time, Brazil has been growing as a power, not just in Latin America, but around the world, as you were pointing out before. And so it's trying to distance itself from sort of being underneath the power of the United States. The relationship continues to grow in terms of cooperation. I know that the two presidents are discussing all kinds of stuff in the area of science and technology cooperation, spatial cooperation, economic cooperation, social issues that they'll be cooperating on, education, reducing poverty, things like that. At the same time, Brazil has a specific agenda. Dilma Rousseff has been very insistent. She will, on this visit, continue to request that the United States back Brazil's move to get a seat on the United Nations Security Council, and a permanent seat at that. And the United States, the Obama administration, has given no sign whatsoever that they're going to back Brazil on that issue, whereas they have in the case of India, for example. So there are some issues that are very tense between the two countries. And then there is the relationship Brazil has had with Iran, the relationship Brazil has in the region as being a member of UNASUR, of being a member of CELAC, these new emerging entities in Latin America of mutual cooperation amongst nations, of which the United States is completely excluded. So I think that that's, another issue that's going on there. And at the same time, this is actually a more important visit for President Obama than it is for President Rousseff, because next weekend is the Summit of the Americas. It takes place in Colombia, and the U.S. is really on the outs in Latin America, and nobody wants to be meeting in these types of meetings anymore with the United States, where they're excluding countries such as Cuba. So the United States is still making a play to try to gain relations or increase relations with countries like Brazil that have serious influence over others in the region, to say, hey, we're still their friends, so we should be your friends too.
I think it's interesting, Eva, that you pointed out this desire by Brazil to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. The U.S. again did back India in that, and it's interesting because we did just see the BRICS countries meet. I think it was last week, maybe a week and a half ago, I'm not sure, and not too much came out of the one-day meeting, but I do know that they sort of stood firm on a lot of things together, one of which they say they oppose any sort of outside intervention in the situation in Syria. And so it's really a tough time right now, and I'm wondering what you think. I mean, is this something, this desire for a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, is this something that could be used, as a bartering tool to sort of get that relationship together, sort of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours?
Well, so far, like I said before, Washington has given no sign whatsoever that it would even consider backing Brazil for a permanent seat on the Security Council. And Brazil has opposed the intervention against Syria, or the aggression against Syria, the resolutions the U.S. has been trying to push. And it also held an absentee vote in the case of Libya, and was vocally opposed to the war on Libya and what the U.S. was engaging in against the government of Gaddafi. So we've seen some of these different issues come up over the past few years where Brazil has taken a stance on international issues that goes against U.S. agenda. So why would the United States want a country like that to have a permanent role on the Security Council? They're already battling now against Russia and China. So maybe they want a country like India because they think, for some reason, that they could get India under their arm.
India would be more likely to take their side.
Right.
Just real quick, Eva, I want to kind of just take a look at Brazil right now. Development there over the last 10 years has been massive. Crime is way down. From what I understand, Rousseff has a 77% approval rating. In some ways, you'd think maybe President Obama would, say, hey, come talk to me, give me some advice. How are you doing this? I mean, do you think that that's going on at all?
Well, it would be hard to imagine a United States president asking for advice on how to govern from a Latin American leader. That would be a great day, I think, for world affairs and particularly for U.S. Latin American relations were that to happen. But certainly Brazil does have a lot to teach the United States, as other Latin American countries do. And the Brazilian government under Dilma Rousseff, which is a continuation of the previous government in terms of their social policies, has been achieving extraordinary results in poverty reduction, crime reduction, as you were saying, in overall well-being for the country and progress, and doing so in a way where it's not jeopardizing or compromising the social values of the country and social programs, like what's happening in the United States. They're not cutting back on social programs. They're not cutting back on workers' benefits. They're making sure all of those are still in place because those are very important issues in terms of overall well-being of a nation and prosperity, not just economic, but also for the people of the country.
Certainly one reason probably why she has been so popular. Appreciate your insight on this. In New York City, Ava Golinger, lawyer and author.
Thanks.